Emily Morgan. I'm the president, founder, and CEO of Delegate Solutions, and I'm also the visionary.
I'm Joe Belsh. I'm the COO and integrator for Delegate. I've been with the team now for almost a decade, working side by side with Emily. So yeah. When we met, I was basically operating as, I was self-employed, but operating as Emily's like fractional integrator, really. I mean, I feel like my role has never really changed. It's just we've kind of given it, we didn't even know what an integrator really probably was at that time. But I just at the time, I guess Emily and I both respectively were kind of running wearing all the hats in the business in a way outside of the folks who were working directly with all of our clients.
I think Joe and I professionally courted each other for a little bit while we were trying to figure out what the role actually was, because I hadn't ever hired for this type of person before. And it was a really scary hire for me because it was a bigger financial commitment that really was not like a billable type situation. So it was like pure overhead, but it was sort of time to make that investment. And I just remember being really scared to do it.
Emily is the owner of the company, but I don't think there's been a moment where I haven't felt like, and Emily doesn't make me feel otherwise, that like, we've built it together. And so we've seen like any business, people come and go, that maybe weren't in the right seat, or weren't committed to the mission we have as a business. But we've seen a lot of great people stick around, and now we're approximately 50 people strong, and it's a really I don't know, it's a really joyful thing to see. It's a joyful thing to see where how much sorry, trying to find my words, my COVID brain right now. It's been a really joyful thing to see us grow and be able to understand the things that we also used to think were such big deals, like really weren't, and it just, every time you get into a new situation, we get into a new situation together, it always seems like the world's worst thing. And then like a year from then, it's like, wow, that was like not that bad. That's not that bad. So it's a lot of growing, individually and together, and trying our best to help those that have decided to come into the company, like helping them hopefully realize their own potential and growth as best as we've been able to.
We tend to balance each other out. Usually when one of us is really annoyed about something, the other one kind of brings a levity to
the other one belittles the other's feelings and says, it's not that bad, buck up. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, we're basically like family at this point, because we've spent a decade together building this out and just doing the best that we possibly can, the best work that we can, trying to work with the best people we can, collaboratively.
Yeah, and we see, and we've seen a lot of personal change, divorces, moves. I'm 10 years in, and my wife and I are a month away from having our first baby. I got married a couple of years ago. It's been and changed states. This is the third state I've lived in since Emily and I have worked together, started working together. So there's been a lot of personal change and things. And I think if anything, we've really proven the fact that you can have a successful business and you don't have to be breathing on each other every single day, though it is important to have FaceTime and be together in person, of course. But we were proving it before the rest of the world caught on during COVID, and had to adjust to that and get acclimated to it. So
yeah, I always share a story. So the delegate's always been remote, but when I hired Joe, I think I had this vision that he was going to be sitting next to me. And at that point, I was living in an apartment, and like I like was very, detailed to make sure that I had 2 desks in this little office bedroom. And then like I got him sticky notes and like a chair and all this stuff. And we were looking at each other for like 3 hours, and we're just like, you don't need to come back. You can work at home. And like, at that point he was living a half hour away, not even. And so we would get together frequently, like brainstorm or go to dinner or something like that. But it was never like, it was always virtual. With being together was always an exception, like whenever he's in town or some kind of retreat. So I'm the time optimist. I always have a lot of ideas and always bring a lot of energy to them and feel like they're doable, and then set them in motion and, hand things off to the team, and then sort of realize my own bandwidth to come back in and do my piece is usually, more than I anticipated. So that's where I always get hung up with delegating.
I would say probably the reason why we're in the business we're in is because Emily's sort of the exception. So it's like, oh, Emily just sort of figured this out as an entrepreneur, and she doesn't really exhibit it. She absolutely does. But I think what we figured out is really having, even if at some points it could be better and it can be, streamlined, definitely having systems and sort of like if we're building like a railroad track, like everything runs on a track, if you will. So template, is organized as much as we can. Again, there's not a level of perfection so much as constant improvement and mindfulness around that, but it's all about structure. I think, and maybe this is a little bit off topic, but it's also finding the right people, the right who's, to come in and be a part of filling in those components where, I'm not strong at it, or, our other leadership team members, I'm not strong at this or that. I think it's really, sometimes you have to fill in the gaps with fresh blood too. So for us, I think it's always been systems has always kind of kept it. But I think for Emily, I think for a long time, to be honest, I think it was kind of hidden. I think maybe it was revealed itself more as we now have a self-managing company where Emily can really operate almost primarily in her visionary seat, where we can kind of see that a little bit more, where there is that time optimism. But I think we really, I mean this in a positive way, we combat that with structure and the right people owning their seats. One of the things that I picked up on, if I can give a shout out to Doug Tenpass and the second in command mastermind, which is really geared towards integrators. And I'm just pulling up the agenda because for whatever reason, having a little of a brain bubble here. But one of the things he even shared with me, which was great, is whenever we do our same page calls, this tends to play back into delegation, so bear with me, but there's a couple questions that I ask her, and they're very simple. One is, what's on your mind? And the next one is, where do you feel like your vision isn't being executed? And so those two questions, there's always a raw way of asking that, like, hey, what's going on? Give me the update. But when I heard that, it was a very easy way to just try to get aligned. And so Emily answers those questions, and then it gives us an opportunity to kind of solve or IDS those things, if we're using an EOS term, to get to find solutions, so then I can hopefully help remove that obstacle or cascade something to someone that is it's their seat to remove that obstacle. But for the most part, it's just blatant, candid conversation. If it's delegation, it's like, you got to stop doing that. Like, you got to leave it to your team. And Emily has been so intentional and mindful just about building a self-managing company, that even though I know sometimes it's like pulling teeth a little bit, I'm sure, for her, the way she feels, she's done it really, I mean, with a whole lot of grace and a whole lot of what to me always feels like almost like seamlessness and willingness to give it up. When we were small, we had to do everything. We had to get our fingers as dirty as we needed to get something done. And so as we built a self-managing business, we had to develop a trust with others that, not that we don't trust folks, but, we put our best foot forward. And, that way currently is the way to do it. When you get to a certain point where, you're drowning and you need to delegate, you do have to rip the Band-Aid off a little bit. And the more you rip that Band-Aid off, now I'm at the point where I want to keep focusing on removing the obstacles, fixing things, and the newness in the business, from which, hopefully each integrator can always function. It's not always the case, but I almost get mad now when I can't delegate. I guess I sound like an infomercial right now. I've drank all the Kool-Aid in the fridge, um, but it really is about practicing over and over. Like you build something, it's functional. You know my opinion of integrators is we can do a lot of different stuff. We can do it pretty well. We're not the best at it though, and that's okay because we're literally trying to like Neo in the Matrix, the bullets are coming at you and you're just kind of swatting them away. Like we're trying to find solutions to swat all these dodgeballs away in a way that they don't come back. And so that means building things, setting them up with the right person to take them over, make them better, and so that you can move onto the next obstacle for the business, or helping implement some part of the visionary's vision.
But I think you also use L10s, scorecards,
absolutely,
to overcome your interventionist ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say that definitely yes, having this again comes back to structure and some formality. Yeah, having the techniques, like especially that we as a business that deploys EOS, the L10s definitely are a great way to get in the know. I think as we watch managers even come into their roles, everybody is yearning for more information, for context. And when you have the right structure for disseminating and sharing information, that's definitely a strong way to help bottle the need to be in the middle of things. And we have a lot of folks on the team like that. So it's been helpful as our integrator to kind of understand that is that's a great technique. It's a great tool or concept to use. Same page calls, same sort of thing, a little bit of a lighter agenda, but there's still an agenda. So our freedom analysis is great. I think a lot of what people struggle with is not, I think we're getting better. I think the world is getting better at it, but people are starting to kind of finally come to grips with, like, you don't have to be good at everything, and you can actually acknowledge where you're either it's not a strong suit, you don't love it, because that all comes back to the business in a certain way, or even your life. You can apply a freedom analysis to having being married and having kids, and what works for you and your partner, your spouse. So I think for me that I almost have it now down pat where I can compartmentalize in my head. But for folks that don't have a tool to go to, I think our freedom analysis is a really useful tool and concept, from which you can really focus on the things that you should be doing, want to be doing, that bring the most to your business, and find the right who's to pick up things that they may actually love and you hate something. And when I think it was Warren Buffett, I was reading an article recently, I'm sure he's said this a million times, but find the thing you love to do and then do it really well, and you can make a whole career out of it. That's part, not that we're talking about how to have a great career, but like that is part of it, even as an entrepreneur. And I've been an entrepreneur prior to being an integrator here at Delegate. Like that's what it's all about. Find what you're passionate about, function in that, and the things that feel like you're paying your dues, or you're just really de-energize you. There's how many billions of people on the face of the planet. There's someone really great that's going to help not only bring that to fruition, but really make you look like Superman or Superwoman, because they're doing a great job front of house or behind the scenes.
I can add to that. So I've actually had my delegation tools used against me recently in the form of our graphic designer, who was fantastic. And she was doing like all of my tools and worksheets and branding them. And she actually like shut down the consultative side of her practice. And like, we were devastated because we loved working with her. And she was like, yes, as I was doing your worksheet, I was doing the freedom analysis, and I really started to ask myself, what I want to spend my time on. And then she resigned. So the tools work.
that's what delegation is about. It's really a transformational thing. Not, I know we're talking about integrators and visionaries today, but that's what it's about. I mean, anything. I mean, the relationship between integrator and visionary is a transformational experience, and I've seen a lot of people not be able to get out of just that in terms of making spreading those similar concepts to how a manager and a direct report work, which in some respects can function similarly, maybe more microscopic in the weeds related to a certain area of the business, but it's kind of similar. Everyone has to have a sense of vision. Everyone has to have a sense of implementation to some extent. And, I think visionary and integrator really goes beyond just, the owner or the CEO of a business and their second in command.
First thing I delegated when I started the company was bookkeeping and bills, because I knew, like, I'm an English major, numbers are not my thing. So that was like the very first thing I did. And then I still hung on to writing the checks. So like every 2 weeks or whatever, I would write the checks, and the team got bigger. And I was like, it was a little bit fulfilling to write those checks, but it wasn't like, it was never going to be a long-term thing that I would be able to do, especially at our size. So that was probably the second thing. And then after that would be my scheduling. I haven't scheduled for myself in probably a decade. So,
I'll leave it to a generalization. I think for me, I can take a lot of the brunt of doing anything, but for a long time, it was, like I said, now I get almost irritable when I can't delegate quickly enough. But at the time, it's really, for me, it's just getting something to a place that I can leave it in the trustworthy hands of somebody who's going to be way better at that foundational starting point. Once there's a basic, a fundamental solve in place. So for me, it's not any one thing. It's really just knowing that I have the ability to find the right player to plug into something after I've I'll give you an example. We've got folks on our team called success managers, and before that we had something similar that was called a client advocate, which is I'll simplify this and say it's our version of an account manager, but it is so much more than that. And so I love meeting entrepreneurs. I love trying to be as helpful as I can. But as a second in command here, it's probably from a long-term strategy not the best use of my time to be in account management. So when we got to a point where we could financially and with the right who's to go after, we promoted some team members from within and have had folks on the team turn it into something that is way better than I could have ever imagined. Because for me, it's like building a house and putting the bricks together, but someone else is going to come in and do all the decor, inside the house. So I guess you could say I'm just sort of building the outside of the house and letting everyone else make it as amazing as it really can be. I can't take credit, I really can't take credit for that.
They give permission. They maybe create rocks on it. You can create ghost seats on the accountability chart. We've done that in the past. Like we've literally spent every single seat on the accountability chart over the years between the two of us.
Yeah.
So like he was mentioning earlier, like we sort of have built it and then handed it off. Like, and that was always just how we organically grew the business. But what I always teach is we have a tool called the Elevated Week, and that's a great tool to give to a team member. Just let them process how they're feeling. They can then sort of prove the value that they could bring with the time that they've freed up, which creates a really compelling conversation for a leader to hear. And it also helps you see if they're aligned with the job they're doing currently. But team won't delegate unless they're given permission and autonomy to do so. So encouraging them, giving rocks like, hey, this quarter, this team is going to delegate 10% of their work or something like that as a starting point.
Yeah. Yes, yes, and yes. That would be my response. You just gave like five of them. Yeah, I mean, I think because everything does start with the visionary and the integrator, I guess in sort of I'll just stereotype it and assume that it's probably not always the case, but it typically would. I, I think just making sure that in order to really harness delegation, I think it goes back to the relationship too between what the visionary's vision is and making sure the integrator is really clear on that vision, because I think that sort of also dictates what and how things are being delegated. I hope I'm making sense here. um I think when and especially because we see this with a lot of companies clients we've worked with over the years, and even when I'm part of events and or occasions to watch others or observe others experiences and things like that. um Making sure that um there's a really clear plan. Like Emily mentioned, the accountability chart, for example. I honestly think that's a really useful tool fundamentally from a delegation standpoint, because you can start boxing out the things that once you've done, let's say in our, like with our tool of freedom analysis, once you know the things you don't like, you can say, oh gosh, it's all the sale, I'm the visionary and I'm still doing sales. Well, guess what? Figure out all those things you're doing, put it into a box, and obviously you could have a job description prepared, but really having that seat, that open seat for a sales director or whatever that title might be, sales leader, that is like a compass of what you're striving for, what you're setting your budget aside for when you're trying to hire. So uh, clear communication between the two in terms of vision and implementation, and then constantly asking the question, what, if you're not going to use a tool, what don't you like or shouldn't you be doing, so that you can place it somewhere that it is, you can look at it every single day and know where you're headed in terms of what personnel you need to get on the bus to help free whoever it might be. It doesn't have to be the visionary or the integrator. It could be anybody that's really outgrowing their role and has way too much on their plate.
Yeah, and you have to be willing to commit the funds to free that person up, because you understand the ROI and the impact of their time on something more important.
Oh, and then another number one tip: read Emily's book, Let It Go. I mean, there you go. That's free advice. The book is not free, folks. You can't do it all yourself. It takes. I mean, it really does take a village, and so it all comes back to delegating. I'll be honest with you. When I've observed certain integrators, and this is not, it's not. I don't mean this to offend, but I think a lot of us tend to try to own as much as we can. Like maybe we have something to prove. We're overachievers or something. Not to be corny here or use the title of Emily's book, but let it go. Like seriously, because the value of the role that the integrator is so much more than holding on to the day to day. Like I had a mentor say to me, even about a role that we're looking to hire for, that it's common knowledge in our business, is why are you waiting? Like, why aren't you hiring right now? You're going to need it. Like sometimes, like obviously if you don't have the money you can't do it, but otherwise just go for it if you need it. I feel like the personality of the integrator, myself included, is to think about it and think about it and think about it and process through it and come up with as best of a plan as we can. But at a certain point, your business, and you're already collecting all the data that you need. Go for it. Don't hold back. Get enough. Get some more hands on deck, and again, delegate to the right who.
This is not my quote, but I think, hang on. This is not my quote, but from a delegation standpoint, I think what I tend to say to myself a lot is who, not how. I mean, it's a Dan Sullivan Ben Hardy book, but I think it's a great prompt, especially for visionaries and integrators. Like, there's a lot we wanted to accomplish, and it doesn't always have to be, us doing it, how we're going to do it. It needs to be about who's the right person to up level or train or recruit to take it on.